So I think we'll get started now. I'm just writing down who's here. Actually, do we have a quorum, Mary?
You do have a quorum. Quorum is
All
four.
right. All right. Go for. So we'll start with introductions. Um, Grace, and I'll call you out and then I'll call the next person. Grayson, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Grayson. I'm with the Attorney General's office, and I'm not a part of the council.
And Maggie.
Hi, my name is Maggie McLaughlin. I'm a member of the council. I am also Portland's Health and Human Services Director.
And Pat.
I'm Pat. I am the current chair of the Maine Recovery Council, and I am retired and a recovery advocate. And can I add two items if time allots in the agenda?
Yes.
One
Let's do
is that
that right after introductions, okay?
okay, thank you.
And Tess.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tess Parks. I'm a member of the council and the policy director for Maine Recovery Action Project.
Elizabeth.
Hi, I am Elizabeth Fortier, and I am the coordinator for the council.
And Mary.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Coyne and I'm the director of the Maine Recovery Council.
And Brendan, welcome. This is an unexpected pleasure. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Nice to surprise everyone. Brendan O'Neill from the Maine Attorney General's office.
Thank you. And I'm Paul Vinsel. I'm the chair of the governance committee, and I am a addiction medicine physician working with Spurwank and the Central Maine Medical Center Family Medicine Residency in Lewiston. So Pat, you had a couple things you wanted to add to the agenda if possible.
Yeah, so these might not because you have other items, but it has been requested by a member of the council that we consider a policy in regards to speaking on behalf of the council with the press, and also to explore looking at I don't know how to put it, but when legislative bills come up, if there's a procedure in which the council can either be for, against, or opposed to bills, but how that is approached by it. So both of those things, I think, fall under governance, both, who can speak on behalf of the board for the press and how that should be handled when approached, and also talking about legislative items that come up that may affect the board.
Very good. Yes, actually, I had a conversation with Mary yesterday. She brought both of those up. I think those are very germane to what our discussions will be over the next couple of months, which I'll get to at the end of this meeting. So we may not be able to discuss those this month, but we will certainly put them on the agenda for the near future.
Thank you.
And Betsy, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Yes, thank you. I'm Betsy Fitzgerald and I represent the litigating subdivisions and am currently sitting in Washington County.
All right. Oh, and Gordon.
Gordon Smith, State's Director of Opioid Response in Governor Mills' office. Thank you, Mary, for resending the link.
Okay, very good. So the first item on our agenda today is to discuss the job description for the MRC Executive Director. Mary, can I turn this over to you and have you present what you have and get your thoughts on it? I think you probably are the most educated in this. But you are muted. Oh, there we go.
Yes, I can. And Elizabeth is going to also help me in this discussion too. Elizabeth, would you mind pulling up the job description, please?
Mary, I'm sorry, Maggie has a question.
I was just wondering if we're going to debate the three options of the future, can we do that before we talk about the job description? Because that really affects what type of person we're looking for.
Does that make sense to everyone?
It does.
Okay. So the second thing on our agenda is to discuss the options for MRC grant process going forward. And as I heard it in the last MRC meeting, there were three options. Two of them are really what's on the table now, and one is something in the future. Option one would be to continue as we have current procedure as we did late last year. And that would require additional personnel as well as a vendor to assist with the grant application process and contracts. The second one would be to partner with another organization that has experience with the grant and contract process, and we'd want to kind of discuss what that would look like. The third, which we can touch on, but probably won't discuss too much in depth, is to look into the MRC becoming more independent from state government. And Gordon has just kind of brought that up at MRC meetings a couple of times, and I found that very, very interesting. And I think it would really allow us to streamline our practices, but it would require legislation, I believe.
Well, legislation as well as changes to the court orders, I believe. So as I've articulated before, I don't think the legislative change would be that difficult, but I think that the court order changes because you have to get the approval of the subdivisions and their lawyers. That's always been considered by us previously as a really big lift. But I still think that over the long term, it's certainly an option should be considered over some reasonable period of time.
I guess if I can weigh in here, legislative adjustments take time. And if we are looking at any kind of a time crunch, for lack of a better term, then the legislature does not move fast.
Well, far be it for me to disagree with my good friend. I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's just that because I live over there,
Yeah.
I find that process to be much easier than the pace of the judiciary and the litigation that led to the settlement. So let's agree that they're both a bit of a lift and would take some time.
Okay.
And I told somebody even this morning, I think that I felt that maybe step one would be to work with a grant making organization, over the next, say, 12 months. And then the option for actually getting outside of state government could be considered, 12 to 36 months down the road or something.
Thank you, Gordon and Betsy. I think what I'd like to do to start is to discuss these one at a time. The first one being continue as the current procedure, what we did last year, but that will require additional personnel and a vendor. Mary, I know you've thought about this quite a bit. What are your thoughts on this? What would this require from us? Like how much additional personnel? And what type of vendor would we need to do? And if you have a cost estimate at all on that?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I don't have a cost estimate, but this is a conversation that we are also having with the Program and Grants Committee along with the Finance Committee. And when Finance Committee met, we did discuss what our budget our overall budget was on a year-to-year basis for administrative costs. And so Ben will be presenting that at the April council meeting to folks. So while I can't really speak to the, expected cost of staffing up, so to say, I do think if we continue to move forward with managing, developing, and overseeing our own grant processes, we'll need at least one additional staff person, I think, really dedicated to just program management of any grant. And again, I will have more information for the full council meeting with additional recommendations. But having one really dedicated program manager to answer questions, work one-on-one with grantees, would be really beneficial, especially if we want to continue other work in tandem with a grant process. As you all know from this last year, with just having one staff person, we really had to dedicate all of our resources to a grant. And it sounds like we want to be able to manage, multiple processes and projects at one time, which, most organizations do. So having that one dedicated staff person, and then we will need support, which, right now we're looking at vendor support, or that's what we've talked about with an RFP for Barry Dunn or another similar organization, to really provide support in developing the grant application, helping to administer it to some degree. But a lot of the work is also on the back end of, once the grants are awarded, as we're doing now, helping with the contracting, reporting, monitoring, and also the evaluation piece. I do think the council moving forward, would be wise to look at a separate vendor specifically for support developing reporting requirements and evaluation. As you all know, that is something that the council it needs to track and oversee once these grant awards go out, and we eventually have to roll that all up to a dashboard. So having expertise again in the evaluation and reporting side of things specifically, I think would be really beneficial. Again, along with the program manager and then an additional staff person or vendor for the management of the grant rollout.
It would require an additional staff member from the MRC, so that would be contracted by the MRC. It would require vendor support for the grant procedure itself, and then another separate vendor for tracking outcomes and dashboard.
Yeah, I would say at the minimum, that's what we would probably need. And again, there's a world in which we could combine some of that workload, or we could see if one vendor could take on both the evaluation and the grant management. The other piece that I want to mention, and I don't really have more to say about this right now than just to put it out there for discussion, is, the Attorney General's office plays a huge role in our work and has been a great partner to us with contracting and making sure payments go out on time and all of that. And so I do think we would be wise to at least have discussions with their office if there's any additional support the Maine Recovery Council can provide, knowing that as our workload increases, so does theirs. And they're not contracted necessarily to do that work. Don't know what that would look like, but it could be possible for the MRC to support maybe a staff position in the Attorney General's office, or at least to have a consultant who could work with them. I know there are barriers and rules around how that could work and what information, let's say, a contractor could have access to, but something for us to consider, again, knowing the role they play, especially on the financial side of things.
Thank you very much, Mary. I'm going to open it up for questions or comments just on part A now. Pat, go ahead.
So, Mary, I do have a question, a clarification question. When you say that that evaluation and dashboard, where does the Cutler Institute fit into that? And shouldn't they be doing some of that? And are we expected to hire someone else other than what they would do?
That's a great question, Pat. And Brendan, if you're on the line, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong here. But my understanding is that the Catherine Cutler Institute has been contracted by the Attorney General's office primarily to provide some form of technical assistance support to the subdivisions and helping them sort of plan out the administration of their funds. As part of that work, they are also working with, I think, a web designer, or they're partnering with another organization to develop a dashboard, and they have a website that they're working on, again, more for the technical assistance side of things. We will have to report our data to them, again, is my understanding, so that that information can be rolled up to the dashboard. But as far as the work they've been contracted to do by the AG, I do not believe that includes evaluation support for the council specifically. We would have to do that as a separate contract on our own, or work with another organization to provide a similar service.
Yeah,
Is that your
Mary,
understanding?
it's pretty similar. You're right in your description of like the website that they've developed to provide technical assistance to the subject. So let me back up. My my understanding of our relationship with the Cutler Institute for this project is to be focused on providing assistance and resources to the subdivisions. The it sort of is two parts. One is provide technical assistance for subdivisions for what they have requested, but it's also to provide, part of that is to provide sort of uh, uh, evaluate, tracking, and to some degree evaluation and publishing data about what the subdivisions are facing and what they're doing. So the website, think of it as two ways. If you're in a subdivision and you're looking for information about how to do a public process or how to do a grant application or about evidence-based programs, you can go there and find what you need. On the other hand, if you're a member of the public or a decision maker in some other body, they're going to have what they call community profiles of of all the subdivisions and therefore the entire state, showing, like, you can drill down into a given subdivision, see what are the challenges in terms of opioid burden, opioid addiction burden in that given community. What some of potentially, I think, what available resources there might be in that subdivision, and then ideally it'll take sort of the next step and say it will report on what that subdivision is doing with their money, based on what they're collecting either publicly or in their conversations with subdivisions. And then potentially there would be, I think a goal is to work towards being able to make available information on the efficacy of the funded programs of the subdivisions. So that's my understanding of what the project is. We've had discussions about whether or not they could also do that latter portion of things, post on the dashboard what the council's doing, and I think and work with the council on evaluations. Those conversations have it would be faster for the council to directly engage the Cutler Center to help with its evaluation work at this point. That would be my suggestion, to start those conversations, and then we can see sort of where that goes.
Brendan, you're suggesting that maybe the MRC contract separately with the Cutler Institute as opposed to joining in with the subdivisions.
I would conflate those two things. But the Cutler Institute would need, we're paying them to focus their work on the subdivisions. they're not being paid to do the evaluation work for the Recovery Council.
Okay. Maggie?
I wonder if we could maybe in time, I don't know if Mary, this would be something in all your free time. But I feel like essentially it would be helpful to have a bit of a scope of work around exactly what we're talking about when we say monitoring and evaluation. And I can't remember off the top of my head the obligation to evaluate, but it can mean so many different things. And from a gold standard evaluation where we would be having case controls, that is incredibly expensive and we'd be having to build that in now, to just regular programmatic evaluations that largely could be drawn from performance monitoring data throughout the life of the program. So it really depends on how much we want from that process. And I would say typically if we engage with an academic institution on those evaluations, the cost of the evaluation will be considerable. And so what we may be able to think through is what specifically are we evaluating, and can we do that through process monitoring indicators, or is there some larger question that requires a more robust mechanism for us to answer to evaluate? And then based off of that need, then decide who could be best filled to do that, whether we manage that in-house through an academic institution or through a different process, just because the degree of cost associated with evaluations can be so wide, just based off of what we're looking for.
And I should Maggie, you raise a good point. I should just clarify that I was talking about the Cutler Institute because they're already doing this work through our office, for the subdivisions, and they're hosting, the dashboard, and it kind of makes sense in my mind for the council's work to go on there also. But the council can retain, anybody it wants to for evaluation work. Cutler has that capability, as I understand it. But the council may want to have an RFP or, some other like process to evaluate, evaluation.
Thank you, Maggie and Brendan. Any other questions or comments on letter A?
Paul, if I can just jump in, Maggie,
Yeah.
thank you for that suggestion. And I think it is doable for me to pull together some of the really key and essential roles the council is going to need to consider moving forward, and to provide an overview of what that looks like or what it could look like and what some of those key decision points are for the council. I can tell you that from my conference last week in North Carolina with other settlement administrators, valuation was a hot topic and something we spoke about a lot. And luckily other states have started to do some of this work. So we have some great resources that we can pull from, and some examples of how other states again are evaluating their settlement funds specifically. So I'll outline that a little bit, and that way we can have a more robust discussion with the full group in a couple weeks.
If we would choose A, it looks like we've got several things that would be required. One, to start, is to really determine what is encompassed by the term evaluation and what do we want to evaluate. Number two, we would need to hire at least one MRC staff person for program management. Number three, we would have to look for vendor support, such as who has it done something? Mary, what's the company you're working with?
Barry Dunn is the name of the organization we currently contract with. Yes. And we do, I will say, a few months ago, maybe longer, I developed an RFP that the council has reviewed. It's still in draft form, but that RFP was specific to grant management roles and responsibilities. And so I'm happy to share that with the council again, at least as a starting point, again, for us to consider, and that document's drafted. So it would be one less thing we have to do.
And then number 4, we would need to look at a separate vendor for tracking outcomes and the dashboard. And that would depend on what we determine is encompassed by the word evaluation. That would inform number 4. So number 1 would inform number 4. Brendan.
Thanks, Paul. On the point of, multiple vendors, I just want to suggest that, that may sound like a lot, but it also may turn out to be less than it sounds because, those separate tasks could be sort of time limited. If a vendor is providing, grant application support, that work ends when the grant process ends. Similarly, the, post-grant administration support, would sort of pick up and then, go on for some period of time. So it may not be that you've got 2 vendors that are working, 100% of the time. So the work may not be as as uh, significant as it sounds.
Okay. Maggie?
I think I had 2 points. One, when you talked about vendors and defining, can you add in monitoring and evaluation just so we can really map when we're talking about monitoring performance, and that's programmatic quality as well as like financial, what that means, and then what that means versus evaluating. And I think those are 2 bodies of work. I guess I'm questioning, it feels like we jumped immediately to vendors for some of these things. And I wonder if we could think of or reanalyze it in light of the overarching decision of do we do this in-house or not? Because if we have 18 years planned of distributing grants, what is the most effective and efficient way for us to do this? Is it for us to every year hire vendors to do this? Is it to hire vendors to just set up systems for us on this front end and then we can implement it? But I think in the long term, it may be worth looking at what is more cost effective to do this in-house and have 1, 2, 3, 4 staff that do it, or to continually hire these vendors year on year. Both of them may be very reasonable, but I think if we're looking at problem solving for the lifetime of MRC, particularly this first third of the lifetime of MRC, where we'll be the heaviest with the grant delivery, is that something that's more cost effective to outsource or just keep in-house?
Where would we go for a cost analysis of that?
I mean that's something that we could begin to look at. I'm not going to make promises that by the April council meeting we can do a full cost analysis of that, but it's certainly something that I know Elizabeth has already started looking into with the ED position and looking at what could be sort of expected salary ranges based on the roles that we're looking for. So we can certainly do a little bit of research into that and provide again some rough estimates.
Sounds like we should probably hire someone to look into that. No, I said that kind of jokingly, but really all of this is so much work. And Mary doesn't have time, and Elizabeth doesn't have time. Brendan doesn't have time. His staff doesn't have time. No one on the council has time to do all this. And so it seems that as we get more and more in the weeds of us doing it, we do it as the Recovery Council, do it in-house, or even if we hire vendors for part of it, it's just such a huge lift. I'm looking at it as trying to look at it kind of as an outsider as opposed to the chair of the governance committee. Pat.
So as I look at this, I keep looking at the layers upon layers upon layers of contracted individuals that are now going to do the business of the council. And I struggle with, does the council even know what they want all these people to do? And so that's sort of where I'm struggling and trying to wrap my brain around it. It's like, well, we need somebody to do the grant management, we need somebody to do this and somebody to do that. And so you keep adding these people on, and I'm thinking, okay, who's going to keep track of all these people? Because now we have a huge team instead of, one or two people. And so there's a concern as to, does the council really have a mission as to what they want to do, and what it looks like, and what is our strategic plan? And so there's where my struggle is, as I look at this. Because there is a lot of work to do. I mean, Mary does an amazing job. And the point is, you got the clock ticking that Mary is leaving. And so some decisions have to be made. And I will tell you, as I look at this, and you keep adding layers on of people we need to do it, more and more I go to option B, which means we look into partnering with an agency that does this regularly, like Maine Community Foundation or MEHAF, or however you would look at it. Because again, you're putting together a whole team to basically run a significant funding source. It's not just a little small nonprofit. It's a lot of money, over 18 years. And you have a continual change. 4 years is your max of people that can
Pat,
sit on
Pat,
there. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you because we're going to have a whole section talking today about Plan B.
Yep. Okay.
And that's going to come up now. I think Maggie, I'll let you go. And if anyone has any other comments on Plan A, give them now, because we're going to then go to Plan B, and it's not the kind of Plan B you can get at Walgreens. Go ahead, Maggie.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of echo, I agree with that in the sense like essentially we are a foundation, and the council can provide the guidance and the strategic direction and the buckets. But it's in kind of a little bit insane to think that we can be such a large foundation that exists with one staff member. Much, much smaller foundations have huge teams compared to this. And so that's where it's like, if we want to remain a foundation and have 100% of control, then I think we do need to build out a robust team. And I think it's minimum 5, if not more. But if we want to outsource, and we can still have some control, but then we may have some trade-offs in that. But if we don't want to go down this route of building an entire team, then this Plan B seems to me to be the avenue that may be more viable. But I would hate for us to go down Route 1 without doing that investment. And so I think that's kind of the decision point that we're at.
I'm sorry, Maggie, your last sentence. You'd hate to have us. Can you
I'd hate to
repeat
have
that?
us move forward with doing it ourselves without building out a robust team.
Yeah.
Even if we do outsource parts of this, that team still needs to oversee the people we're outsourcing it to. And so the vendors. And so I think if we choose option A, I think we would be most effective in choosing a robust team of 5 or more staff to move this forward. And it helps to think of it as a foundation and how many staff are needed to run a foundation effectively. It's a little, even that number is low.
I really
Covered.
appreciate this conversation. A lot of you have obviously expertise in this and have dealt with this type of thing before, so I appreciate that a lot. So let's talk about Plan B. And that would be to partner with another organization that is experienced with the grant and contract process. In just the way I look at it, we would be giving up some control. But like you said, Maggie, we could still provide guidance. We may even be able to, I don't know, maybe we could have still final say. But I'd like to hear from people. Mary, have you looked into Plan B at all, or do you have any experience with that? I suspect Pat and Maggie have some experience with that.
The plan B that we're speaking of is definitely something that I've thought a lot about, and especially as again, for a long time being the one staffer of the council. And I think the biggest thing, I know, this is an ongoing discussion we'll need to have. And, as Pat mentioned, it really is within the context of our strategic planning and thinking about what we want the next 6 and, 9, 12 months to look like. I think one of the key components here is the timeline. And if we were to go with Plan B and partner with organizations, it would be a quicker process, I believe, for the council to develop its set of guidelines, essentially, for grant making, and then to contract with one organization to then administer that grant and oversee the distribution of those funds from there, with reports required for the council every quarter, annually, whatever you all want to do. If we are to continue to do everything in-house, which I don't have a preference either way because I won't be part of it. But I just want to recognize the time that will take. I mean, again, we've operated for the past almost 2 years with just one staff person, and having a new ED and someone really being the leadership of this council, that's going to take time. And I think staffing up is also going to take time. And so for us to have the staffing capacity we need to see another grant process through is really a 6+ month process. Again, to make sure we can do that right and have the staff on board and feel supported before diving into, managing a grant or something like that.
Thank you, Mary. Pat?
So, I can't remember whether Brendan was part of the conversation, but Ben, Man, and I, and maybe Brendan, met with Maine Community Foundation. You weren't part of that. So we met with Maine Community Foundation probably close to a year and a half ago now. It was early on in the process that Ben was thinking that we could partner with Maine Communities Foundation. At the time, it was funny. They looked at us and said, "That's a tremendous amount of work. They don't have the staff to handle it." So, my vision was after talking with Ben was if we did do that, that we would allow them to take some of our grant dollars and hire a staff member within their organization that their whole entire job responsibility would be would be our funding, our grants. And that person who'd work for that company doing all the grant work would then again have to appear before the council, and final approval for anything would have to go to the council. I mean, it's a unique situation. I'm neither for nor against. I'm in the middle of whether we do it all our own or with another company. But there is advantages to both ways. I think it's a conversation that needs to have. But it was funny. Maine Communities Foundation at the time said the project would have been so big they don't have the staff to do it. And we
we're
turned
doing
around
it with one staff
and we
person.
turned around and did it with one person. So, and they're experts in their field. If you're not familiar with Maine Community Foundation, they certainly are a huge organization that this is what they do for a living. But I think those are conversations we could have. There is advantages and disadvantages. The biggest disadvantage that I see is the council really does want to be able to be responsible for the money and ensure that money goes where they believe the MOU and all of that is. And you lose a little bit of that if you contract out. But I think you can manage it so you can have both worlds. So again, I'm neither for nor against. It's just, I believe Maggie put it very nicely. If we decide to do with Plan A, we really need a minimum of 5 people, at least helping out, making sure this process is. And the other thing that saves me is, if I'm not mistaken, these are 2-year grants. So we're not going to turn around next year and be doing a whole grant process. For right now, 2 years of our funding, the majority of it has been allocated. And so we do have a little bit of time if we hired an executive director to turn around as their job to say, How do we construct ourselves in some way, put a structure together that works?
Thank you, Pat. Brendan?
I just want to note, I think this is already obvious that it sounds to me like the same conversation is happening in multiple committees. And so there's some redundancy and which, is fine. But, I just want to note that like, it's worth it for folks to, check in with each other on this.
And I think I agree with that. I think that should be done in an open process, probably at the next MRC meeting. I've got a question, Mary. Should we, as a governance committee, should we come up with a recommendation for where to go with here between plan A or plan B? Should we come up with a recommendation for MRC, or is that premature?
I think at this point it might be premature, Paul. And the reason I say that is, as Brennan just mentioned, like the Program Grants Committee is also having this discussion, as is the Finance Committee. So I do think the April council meeting will be an opportunity for us to all have that discussion together. What I've taken from this that's very helpful is a recommendation from this committee to outline what the key roles are that we would be looking at either to take on in-house and for staffing up and what that could look like, either as contractors, through vendors, or what roles and responsibilities we may assume another organization or partner would take on if we were to go down sort of the plan B route. So I don't think a definitive recommendation is needed, but again, helpful discussion that we can certainly report out on, and that we can bring to the Program and Grants Committee on Tuesday to give them an update about what discussions we've already had. Again, hopefully to just keep things moving forward.
Maggie, you had your hand up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense if everybody's having the convo to just group it together and make decisions then. But
I
one
just
thing
thought
I
we
think
were
to
more
keep
important.
right, let's do it here. One thing to keep in mind, I think, in some of the discussion, I think it would be useful to be a bit open-minded about what overhead might be needed with a foundation. And I don't think we'll be able to compare apples to apples. So it would cost 5 people here and they'd be able to hire 2 because they're what the advantage that they're bringing is a full system. So they've got their in-house finance team that does X, Y, and Z. They've got their monitoring team that does X, Y, and Z, etc. And so most likely we're going to be talking percents of various teams' time as opposed to individuals. So I think it'll be hard for us to compare, and I would resist using that as a tool to make a decision. But I also think it's worth valuing the expertise that is needed to do this well, and that often that is earned after years and years of experience, and these foundations bring that. They also bring the in-house experience with where it doesn't go well, and so they're going to have more risk management systems. I mean, obviously, we'd have to do our due diligence to make sure we're finding the right partners, but they'll have more risk management systems to flag earlier on in the process where things might be going off track with a grantee, as opposed to us, we'll be building out kind of a skeletal monitoring system by default of a leaner team, which would be much more kind of, no matter how robust we try to do it, unless we staff up at the same levels, would be more kind of skeletal and more based on touch points as opposed to kind of deep relationships that they may be able to create. And so I'm also on the fence, but I do value that experience that they bring, and I think it could help us avoid challenges in the future by nature of their ability to troubleshoot.
Mary, I have a question for you. You just came from a conference in North Carolina discussing with a lot of other states and what they are doing. Are there other states that have looked at these options and made decisions? And where have they gone? And what has their experience been?
So the short answer is that other states have at minimum 4 staff people. So they do most of it in-house. A big takeaway for me from last week's convention was that every state's MOU was a little bit different, and the way their staff and their funding is structured is also different. So it's hard to have a real point of comparison. I will say I didn't hear of many states who partner with other organizations to administer their grant funds. They do most of it in-house. The only exception to that might be Minnesota or Alaska. And I can certainly dig into that a little bit more. But again, it's hard really to say because the structure is so different, and most states are embedded within their state government, and so they have quite a bit of support.
Tess, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any comments so far?
Sorry, I took my camera off because I'm eating lunch in between a series
Okay.
of Zoom calls and I'm starving. I think from my perspective, I know this could be challenging, but just, reiterating what a few other people have said is if we can have a clear cost benefit analysis of all of the options, and I know that could be hard, but just thinking about timeline, ease of implementation, cost, having all of those factors could be helpful in figuring out which way to go. I mean, I'm inclined to defer to the expertise in our group for those that have had experience with this, because that's not something I've had professional experience with. So I would just want to have as much information as we can to make a decision that will hopefully not only benefit us in the near term, but in the longer term for each year, to make it easier for future councils to come as well.
Thank you, Tess. Gordon.
Yeah, I'm kind of where Pat is. I'm kind of ambivalent amongst the various choices. We have to do something. And any of those first two choices is going to take 6 months. I mean, even if we were to hire out, hire 3 more people, that would take that long under the state processes. So I'm okay. I'm glad I think we have a grants and programs committee meeting on Tuesday. So we can talk about it more there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Betsy.
I wish I could add something that would be earth-shattering. Unfortunately, everybody stole my thunder. So I won't belabor any one point, but thank you.
All right. My opinion is based only on my selfishness that I like things done as easy as possible and with as few decisions as I can make. And so when I have a big job to do, I want to hire someone to do that job and let them decide on the details. When I had an addition to my house, I just hired someone to come and do it. And they hired the plumber and the carpenter and all of that. And that was nice and easy, and I got a nice house. So that's kind of where I'm feeling, but that's not necessarily the most cost effective, and certainly you lose some control. But I think this is a great discussion, and we're not going to make the decision here. So the first thing that we had on our agenda was the job description for MRC Executive Director. And I want to spend a few minutes doing that at the end. But before we do that, there's a couple things I need to talk about real quickly. This time period, 12 to 1 on the fourth Friday is not good for Brendan. He has another meeting at that time, so this conflicts with that. However, the same day, the fourth Friday from 11 to 12 would be okay for Brendan, or from 1 to 2 would be okay. I do feel Brendan is really important for this, specifically for this committee, because we come up with a lot of legal questions. So I'm questioning to the MRC members that are on the committee, would 11 to 12 or 1 to 2 work for you? Which one is better? Maybe 11 to 12, because then you could enjoy lunch after.
11 to 12.
I like
Please.
11 to 12.
Okay, so fourth Friday. Mary, I'd like to move from now on to be the fourth Friday from 11A to 12P.
Great. We can do that.
The second thing is I want to talk about about what I think we should have on the agenda probably next month. I've been doing some research into the Freedom of Access Act, and I did read the legal case that Brendan set out. I did watch the video of Brenda Keelty, who is the open access ombudsman, in her talk with the Lewiston City Council. And I do think that we should look at our bylaws, and some of them are kind of in contradiction with certainly the spirit, if not the letter, of the FOA Act. And I think we need to have that discussion next time. And what I will plan to do is to send out copies of the FOA statute and places where I've found that we may be not complying, as well as the bylaws with yellowed out where we can, what I'm thinking of. So I'd like to have that discussion. And the other thing is, I do know that if we change our bylaws, it will probably make our job more difficult in the council meetings, in that there will be more discussion needing to be done. So I want to also look at how can we be most efficient in those meetings. And that's something we can discuss in the governance committee also. So that's in the future. So if everyone is okay, could we discuss the executive director job description for 4 minutes?
2 minutes left, right?
4.
I guess I wonder, it may not be worth diving into it. It was, I guess what I'll just say though is the one I attached. Oh, Mary, you go first.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say the one I attached was envisioned for a system in which scenario A, we're building the entire team in-house. And so any other system would need a lot of edits. And I think even the one I attached needs a lot of edits and wordsmithing and more focus on team management too, if that's the case. Go for it, Mary.
I completely agree with everything that you said. And I want to mention that for the Program and Grants Committee, what Elizabeth is helping do is pull together a couple examples of similar job descriptions so that the Program and Grants Committee can review those as well, and then have a discussion, with this discussion in mind, about what might be the best job description for us to move forward with. Again, I will just say that we do need to have a final job description by the April council meeting, for there to be really any overlap with me and someone else. So it will definitely be a big discussion, and one I'm sure that will be very lively, but nothing really to add at this point, other than what we've already discussed.
Pat?
So just need to reiterate what Mary is saying, that the decision has to be made at the April meeting about how they're going to move forward, at least for, if nothing else, but for the next year to get a contract. If we don't have an approval of a job description at the April meeting, we can't advertise for the job, which then again puts us back another 30 days, which means we will be most likely be without an executive director, or at least a part-time, we'll only have a part-time one. In and I don't think that's what the direction we want to go. So it's just, it is a ticking time bomb that needs to be voted on and out there.
Maggie? Thank you, Pat.
If that's the case, can we have like 3 executive or like multiple job descriptions at that meeting? Because I don't think we'll be able to edit the job description at the range it's needed for these scenarios. So like a job description for scenario A, a job description for scenario B, and that way we're just fine tuning one or the other, because otherwise I don't think we'd have time to really get through the debate of the direction and then have a matching job description.
I agree with that, Maggie. Mary, would you be able to help with that at all?
But between Elizabeth and myself, yes, we can
Okay.
do that.
Gordon?
Yeah, I realize it's 12:59, but because I won't be at the April meeting, I'm on vacation out of the country that meeting. It's probably appropriate as any time to tell you that the governor is going to replace me on the council, and that could happen before the April meeting. And the reason is primarily because she'd like to have one of her 2 appointees be able to continue beyond next December, when both Ben and I would be term limited. So we have 2 internal candidates. We really think it's important to have a state person that really can help align the recovery work with the state work. I also am not going to abandon you. I'll attend, unless I have a conflict. I'll attend every meeting of the full council and sit out in the audience and be happy to report to you at any time on my work as director. But the combination of and I think makes a lot of sense for the governor to do this, so that she can have one of her appointees join Tess and Maggie in that cohort of 5 of you that can continue on years 5 and 6 of this council. So it's one of the reasons why I've been a little quieter than normal today. Is that I'm not going to ultimately beyond probably Tuesday's meeting, which is April 1st, right, of the grants meeting. You'll probably then see me in this new capacity, which I think is appropriate. And so I, for all kinds of reasons, most of you know this, but I think Betsy and Maggie would be hearing it for the first time. So I thought it was important to share it with you.
Gordon, you're not giving me enough time to let you know how much I appreciate you.
Plenty of time to do that later.
I don't like the sounds of any of it. I understand the reason, but I don't like any of it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, I understand.
But I totally get the logic.
Thank you.
So I'm going to thank you very much, Gordon, for letting us know. I'm going to end the meeting, and our next meeting will be April 25th. And I will be at the American Society of Addiction Medicine Conference in Denver at that time, but I will break off for the meeting from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Any last comments or questions before we break?
Yeah. Thanks for moving the meeting time to accommodate my very important schedule. And now that you've done that, I just want to note that I'll be on vacation the next time this group meets. And I'll be out of the country as well, so you can try to reach me. But think that's probably not going to work. So I'll be out for full, for all the council's business. I'll be out of the office for that week of April 21st-ish, give or take a few days.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Excellent meeting. I'll try to get the minutes out this weekend. And you all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.